You ever get that feeling, like when you're walking a familiar path and suddenly there's this turnoff you never noticed before? Like a hidden doorway to a whole other world, right there in plain sight.
Yeah, I know what you mean, like rediscovering something you thought you knew, but with all these layers you missed before.
Exactly. And that's kind of the journey we're taking today, back into the heart of Mortal Kombat. Specifically, Deception. That 2004-2005 era, remember that one?
Oh yeah, Deception. It's amazing how much there is to unpack, even in a game you think you've mastered.
Right. It first landed on PlayStation 2 and Xbox fall of '04. Then a little later, GameCube got in on the action, early 2005.
Yeah.
But for everyone listening, whether you were right there in the trenches back then or you're just now getting drawn into this chapter of Mortal Kombat, our goal today is to kind of excavate deception, not just skim the surface.
Yeah, like a real deep dive.
A real deep dive. We're going to see what made this one tick. The story, the characters, even some of the almost forgotten ideas that, well, they never quite made it. And our map for this whole thing, our guide, is the fandom wiki page. It's got it all. From the lore and character bios to arena layouts, minigame breakdowns, even some of those juicy behind-the-scenes whispers. So, ready to jump in? Let's start with the story. Things get pretty dark pretty fast.
Yeah, the whole setup for Deception is just brutal. It throws you into this world where Earthrealm's best fighters, they've been completely wiped out, seemingly for good. It wasn't just a loss in a tournament, it felt like the end, The Deadly Alliance, Shang Tsung and Quan Chi, they'd actually won.
And Raiden, he tries to stop them, right? Makes this desperate last stand. You think, this is it. He's got to turn things around.
Yeah.
But he gets taken down too. It's like no one is safe.
And things get even crazier. The Deadly Alliance, they turn on each other. Quan Chi ends up taking out Shang Tsung. Just when you think he's on top, though, boom. Onaga, the Dragon King, is back from the dead, and he takes down Quan Chi.
So much for alliances, right? Then Raiden, the guy who is literally just fighting them, has to team up with Shang Tsung and Quan Chi against Onaga. Talk about an enemy of my enemy situation.
It's like this desperate last-ditch effort, but even with their combined power, they can't touch Onaga. Raiden ends up unleashing his own essence, like this massive energy blast, just to try and stop him. But Onaga, he just shrugs it off, and now he's got Quan Chi's amulet too.
Now, talk about a bleak end.
Talk about bleak. And in the middle of all this chaos, we get introduced to Shujinko. He's the guy who accidentally helped Onaga come back in the first place, so he's got to go on this quest to fix things, to take back the power he unknowingly set loose, and ultimately face Onaga.
Yeah, it's a classic redemption arc, but set against this backdrop of total devastation.
Right. And on top of all that, Deception brings in a whole bunch of new fighters. I mean, a lot of new faces. There's Ashura, Daru, Darius, Havoc, Hotaru, Kira, Cobra, and then Onaga himself, of course, and Shujinko. Plus, that weird duo, Noob Smoke. It's like they wanted to shake things up, introduce this whole new generation into this already messed up world.
Oh, and it wasn't just new characters. They brought back some old favorites too. Nightwolf, Ermac, Jade, and classic stages, the courtyard, the portal,
Yeah.
even the original pit. It was like rediscovering these lost relics,
Oh, and there were even rumors that Rain might come back.
Talk about fan service. But it made sense. It balanced things out, bringing in all this new stuff, but still giving a nod to the past, the classic stuff people loved.
But they didn't stop there. This is where things get really interesting. Deception actually went off the beaten path. Big time. It wasn't just about the fighting anymore.
Right. They threw in these mini games, puzzle combat and chess combat. No one saw that coming. It was a total curveball. So puzzle combat, like falling blocks, kind of like, those falling block games.
Huh.
But with a Mortal Kombat twist, you make matches, you get special attacks. There's even this dragon logo that pops up, like that classic MK symbol, and it triggers even crazier stuff. You could play solo, try to climb this tower, each level getting tougher.
It got surprisingly addictive.
It did. But then there was chess combat. This was like, I don't know, something out of a weird dream. All the Mortal Kombat characters turned into chess pieces, and each piece had special moves on the board. So you're strategizing like regular chess, but then when you land on an opponent, boom, mini Mortal Kombat fight breaks out.
Crikey.
Right? It really was a total experiment. You got to give them credit for trying something totally different. And speaking of different, how about those limited edition releases? Now this is for all the collectors out there. Deception had these separate limited editions for Xbox and PlayStation 2. Each one had its own unique cover art. Xbox got, Baraka, Scorpion, Mylena, Raiden, and PlayStation 2 got Sub-Zero. It was like they were letting you pick your allegiance right there at the store.
I still have my Sub-Zero edition.
And that Sub-Zero edition on PlayStation 2, it had more than just a cool cover. They packed in a metal trading card and a bonus disc with tons of Mortal Kombat history. A timeline of the whole series, character videos, even a perfect arcade port of the original Mortal Kombat. It was like a history lesson and a collector's item all in one.
They really knew how to hook the diehard fan.
But the real secrets, those are buried deeper. If you head over to that fandom wiki page, check out the Notice Additionales section. It's like cracking open this lost developer diary, filled with all these almost forgotten ideas, things that could have been.
Oh yeah, that's where the real juicy stuff is hidden.
For starters, the game was almost called Mortal Kombat. Realms. Imagine that.
Realms. It makes you wonder if they were thinking even bigger, you know? Like even more realms to explore.
Right, what secrets those other realms might have held. And then there's this weird thing on the Dark Prison stage. You can see these other MK characters like Reptile, Shiva, just kind of stuck in there.
Yeah. It wasn't actually part of the story or anything, just a little visual Easter egg the developers threw in.
Yeah.
Like a hidden layer of lore.
Creepy, right?
Right.
And get this, in the intro sequence, there are names hidden in the clouds. Striker, Fujin, Outworld, Netherrealm.
Subliminal messaging. Haha.
Right, like they're teasing us with what might have been. Oh, and the character roster. It wasn't always set in stone. Originally, Kitana was supposed to be in it, but they replaced her with Mylena, and then eventually Jade took that spot.
So many changes. It makes you think about all the different directions the story could have gone.
Totally. And then, Kitana does actually show up in Ermac and Sindel's endings, but she's different. She's wearing Mylena's outfit. Different colors, no mask. It's like this weird echo of a scrapped idea.
It's like catching a glimpse of an alternate timeline.
Right. Oh, and did you know Deception got an adults-only rating in Europe?
No kidding. Guess they weren't messing around.
They weren't. Especially with that whole harakiri thing they added.
Oh yeah, the harakiri. Brutal. You could basically commit suicide before your opponent could finish you off. Like, talk about going out with a bang.
Yeah.
But a really messed up bang.
Definitely added to the whole grim atmosphere. Oh, and here's a fun fact. Shao Kahn and Goro, two of the biggest baddies in Mortal Kombat. They weren't even in the original release, just completely missing from the PlayStation 2 and Xbox versions.
Really? I totally forgot about that.
They added them later for the GameCube version, maybe as a bonus, since GameCube didn't have online multiplayer.
It's wild how each version of the game had these little differences.
Speaking of things that got cut, they were toying with the idea of having super secret characters from Deadly Alliance and Deception. Who knows who they could have been?
I'd love to know who they had in mind.
And for all the lore junkies out there, Conquest Mode actually shed some light on Reiko's story, from Mortal Kombat 4, where he puts on Shao Kahn's helmet. Well, it turns out...
He wasn't actually Shao Kahn.
Exactly. They clear that up in Deception. And the crazy thing is, they hid that info in reversed audio. Like, you have to play the Netherrealm and Chaos Realm and NPC at dialogue backwards to hear it.
Those developers, man, they love their secrets.
They really did.
Huh?
Remember those classic MK1 and MK2 Shang Tsungs? They pop up in the retro stages, even though it doesn't really make sense story-wise.
Just a little nod to the past.
A little blast from the past. Oh, and speaking of blast from the past, those retro stages, they actually use the original music from MK1 and MK2.
Talk about a nostalgia trip.
Right. Deception was also the first one to introduce death traps.
Yeah.
Those stage fatalities. No mercy. You get tossed into the living forest, or you take a dip in the dead pool, game over.
Instant fatality.
And something else that makes Deception unique, it's the only Mortal Kombat game with both puzzle combat and chess combat.
Yeah, those mini-games, they really set Deception apart.
They do. Even some of the individual character details are kind of wild. Scab, Noob Saibot's alternate costume, it hinted at this, like creepy insectoid evolution, and Havoc's whole messed up look. That was actually a rejected concept for Noob Saibot.
Really? Huh. Never knew that.
It's true. Oh, and in France, they had to rename the game Mortal Kombat Mystification. Apparently, Deception has like a really negative connotation in French.
Fascinating.
And Deception was the first game to have a duo character, Noob Smoke, fighting as one unit. That was a huge change.
It was. It added this whole new layer of strategies to the fights.
You know how much the developers loved their Easter eggs? Well, in Conquest Mode, there's an NPC who mentions someone named Carlos Cancina.
Oh, wait, Carlos Cancina?
It's a reference to Carlos Pacina, the guy who played Raiden in the early games.
Aha, so subtle.
So subtle. And remember the intro where we see those quick shots of Sonya, Jax, Johnny Cage, Kung Lao, Kitana? They're all dead at this point. It set this really somber tone right from the start.
It did. Like the whole world was in mourning.
And get this, they were going to have a pocket combat mode. Like chibi versions of all the characters. They even had models for Tanya and Li Mei.
Chibi Mortal Kombat. That would have been interesting.
It would have. And the character swaps just keep coming. They initially planned to bring Sector back, but ended up going with Smoke instead, giving him a design inspired by Cyrax. And then, Sector does show up later in Conquest mode.
Makes you wonder what their original plans for Sector were.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And they almost had this whole 2 versus 2 mode, with tag team combos and everything. Noob Smoke could have been separate fighters then.
Now that would have shaken things up. Tag Team Mortal Kombat.
Can you imagine? Oh, and they even considered adding a stage torture mechanic, like you'd have to match buttons to escape these gruesome traps.
Ouch, that sounds intense.
It's crazy what they thought up. And just when you thought they'd run out of secrets, they hid stuff in reversed audio again. This time in the Hell and Chaos realm NPC dialogue. Weird little tidbits, jokes, all kinds of stuff.
Those guys, man, they just couldn't resist a good secret.
So there you have it. Mortal Kombat. Deception. This one game has a story full of betrayals, alliances you'd never expect, a whole new generation of fighters thrown into the mix with some familiar faces, mini-games that came out of nowhere, and secrets upon secrets. It really pushed the boundaries of what Mortal Kombat could be.
It really did. Deception was this weird kind of experimental chapter in the whole series.
So for everyone listening, we've dug deep into Mortal Kombat. Deception, and uncovered a story full of twists and turns, characters both new and old, unique gameplay additions, and more than a few hidden surprises. It's a game that, even all these years later, still has secrets to whisper.
And with all those hidden layers, all those almost forgotten ideas, it makes you wonder what other secrets are still buried out there in the Mortal Kombat universe.
Exactly. What else is waiting to be discovered? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Mortal Kombat. Deception.